Why do we do spiritual practices? In fact, why do I do spiritual practices? In fact, why am I promoting the spiritual practice that I learned on Patreon called Call of Power Qigong? Why am I selling this Qigong practice? Right? Well, if you would ask someone why they do spiritual practices, one thing they're gonna tell you is that it calms them down, and that's basically the main reason, right? It's the basic effect of every kind of spiritual practice, including prayer. By the way, every kind of prayer, whatever religion you have, is a spiritual practice. So it's not just like meditating and chanting stuff. Although they are also spiritual practices, but prayer is also that. It calms you down. And in fact, I was thinking about this, meditating on topics, right? When we have to make a decision and we have to meditate on this topic, it's like it's not just thinking, it's thinking with a clear mind, thinking with a calm mind. Where you just sit down, you take a deep breath, and then you think. Because sometimes we need a calm and rational mind to decide on things in our lives. So that's one reason why people would do spiritual practices, right? The other reason would be to, people would say it connects you to the divine, it connects you to God, right? But this is something that we know through, like, if you do prayer, as a Christian, it connects you to God. Yeah, we know that. But in terms of spirituality, what does that mean, right? What does what does meditating or any kind of qigong or yoga, what are those, when that connects you to the divine, what does that do? So one thing that it does is, like, gives you that spiritual power. Now, what does that mean? It gives you the ability to decide on things in our life. It gives you the intuition to decide what you want to do in your life, because that spiritual power connects you to your mind and body, connects you to the source, to God, or whatever you want to call it, your own conception of higher power. Because the idea is, at least in spirituality or in pantheism, is that everything is a part of God, or everything is a part of this divine being. And when you get connected to that, it means you get connected to life. That is why people would also say, if you do spiritual practices, you get synchronicities, right? Well, I agree, which is true. It happened to me. It happened to a lot of people that I know that do spiritual practices. So it's like something it happens, right? You'd say it gives you some kind of a luck boost, you would say. So it happens, but the main reason that I would do it is that it gives you that intuition to decide what you want to do in your life. Especially if you're in a specific time in your life where you don't know what to do, you don't know who you are, you don't know where to start, the one thing you can start is to do spiritual practices. Because the main thing that almost all spiritual practices do, it puts you in the flow of life. It sinks you to life. We know what we said about, like, according to pantheism, everything is made out of that divine being. So every atom, every cell is a part of that being, including your consciousness, right? So when you connect to that, you also get connected to decisions you want to do in your life. What do you do better in your life? What do you like to do? Spirituality and not spirituality, but like spiritual practice help you just focus through that. It helps you know yourself a little more. Of course, therapy does that as well. Therapy, that's like the purpose of therapy and spirituality, is to reach to your individuality. That's like the focus of spirituality and psychotherapy, is to be individualized. the definition of, people would say enlightenment, but like the individuality, I think, is a better term in terms of the spirituality, because enlightenment is the end result of that. Whatever enlightenment means, by the way. I mean, my definition of enlightenment is individuality, basically. Having your feelings and not really, having your feelings as your own, having your own feelings, but if you have a fear, you don't act out of your feelings. So your feelings don't control your life. You're aware that you have feelings, but you don't, they don't really control your life. And that's what feelings are. Feelings, especially like bad feelings or fear, it doesn't do anything other than makes you feel bad. Feelings are just indicators of something's going on. If you're afraid of something, you realize you're afraid of something, right? And they don't do anything other than, of course, if you're in a life or death situation, fear helps, right? But now we're in modern society, it doesn't really help anymore. So if your fear makes you do things out of fear, makes you decide things out of fear, you basically go through a life that you don't really like in the end. Especially with anger, that's like what we all know. If anger makes you do things that you regret. So someone who is truly individualized means someone who has all their feelings. Someone says, okay, I am angry, okay, I am fearful, I am very afraid, but you know what is the healthiest thing I can do? Okay, I know this is the healthiest thing I can do, I'm gonna do this even though I'm very afraid. That's individualism. You're aware of it, but those feelings don't control you anymore. So that's like the whole thing that the spiritual is giving me specifically, apart from that intuition. So going back to the topic, now spirituality can help, but also psychotherapy can also help, right? And if you can use both of them, why not, right? All power to you. That's what I did. I mean, that's what I'm still doing, by the way. Whatever you have, if you have something, going to 12 steps groups, having a support group, therapist, whatever, just like getting, committing yourself, committing to your own health, making that decision that you're going to invest in your health. That's what also, a lot of spiritual practices that also promote. But here's another thing. This is one of the reasons why I do spiritual practice, to get that intuition, so that I know, like, to lead me the life that I want to live the most, right? The joyful life that I want to live the most. Spiritual practices gets you closer to there. Qigong, yoga, whatever it is to you, gets you closer to there. But here's an interesting thing, though. A lot of people do spiritual practice because they want to escape reality. At first, that's why I wanted to do spiritual practices. That's why I meditated, because I didn't like my life. I hated my life. I didn't like my life. Years ago, I didn't like where I lived. And it didn't matter what I had. It didn't matter who I had. I just didn't like where I lived. I just didn't like, in terms of like myself, how I lived, because I didn't know what to do, right? And the life kind of I meant was like meaningless. So since spirituality and practices felt good, I put myself through that so that I can ignore that. Yeah, but there's a lot of people that still do that for this reason. I did that too. So I understand this topic. I understand why people would do that. I mean, because it feels good. So that's like the one thing, right? It's another reason people will do it. But there's another reason why I do spiritual practice. I said the first one, the intuition, and the second one is that it transforms you. That's why I do it. This is the reason that I really like doing Qigong, for example. It transforms you as a human being. It gives you the ability to help you choose if you want to transform or not. if you want to become a different person. And what does that mean to transform? You basically become a different person. That's what transforming means. So this is how it works. When you do spiritual practices, and when you get all sorts of power, and what the spiritual practice does, for example, you're doing yoga, and when you do yoga and when you do whatever qigong, it opens this energy pathways in your system called meridians. I'll talk more about that in another video about meridians and what is yoga and all that. But essentially, it opens those pathways. So the main points in your life, we have the Trinity, mind, body, and spirit. By I'm holding my navel center. It's the navel center is also called the Dantian in Taoism and Qigong. But anyway, there are three centers, right? And when you connect all those three centers together, when they all communicate good, when they're all in good communication, then the thing you get is not only synchronicity, but you get clarity on what to decide in your life. Everything becomes much more clear. You know what to do. Things happen where you say, I wish I had a bike. I just moved here and I wish I had a bike, or whatever it is. I wish I had this thing. And you find it. I wish I had a car now that I moved here, right? But I don't have enough money. Let's see, and you end up getting car somehow, right? Like you decide, I wish I had that, and you forget about it. 3 weeks later, you have it. So those are the things, right? It's a result of these all centers are connecting together. That's the whole kind of that's all the thing that's doing that's what all the spiritual power that you get does. It connects all that communication together, which connects you to the divine, which is the same thing, right? But when that happens, you basically tell that in your soul there's this infinite power, basically. And when you do spiritual practice, you ask, hey, I want access to this power. Or you say, hey, I'm getting more energy. I want more energy within my organs, right? When you do qigong, when you get energy from outside, from life itself, your system goes, hey, I can allow you to get more power. However, there's some gunk in your meridians. It's stuck. There's some stagnation in there. And I can't do that unless you get rid of this gunk. Now, what is that gunk in your energy body? It's all the trauma that you have. It's all the thing that is destructive patterns in your life that's stuck in your unconscious mind. I don't remember if I talked about the unconscious mind in my previous video, but unconscious mind is basically the 95% or 80% or something of the mind, of the decisions that you make is done there. And it's called the unconscious because you're not aware of it, right? And there's a quote of Carl Jung that said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will dictate your life, and you will call it fate. One example I can give is that why am I attracting bad people in my life, or why do I attract toxic people in my life? Well, it's you call it fate. I attract it, but I attract it because of you. The thing is, the universe holds us responsible for all the decisions we make in our lives. So the thing is, when we try to get rid, the point is, when we try to get rid of all that gunk, when we heal through all that trauma, whatever we had, whatever resentments we had, whatever thing we stuck, all the emotions that we suppressed when we were a little kid, in dysfunctional homes, a little kid just suppresses it, or what is it called? They disassociate when the parents are fighting because they don't want to feel afraid. They want to focus on the iPad. Those things, right? So and then the child's, can't pay attention right later on. It's like one of the things that I heard. I mean, I'm not a doctor, but like it's one of the things that I heard. Like you get the idea. So when you get rid of that trauma, when you heal through it, that's when the energy comes. And what the energy does is, hey, we want to get rid of this. If you want access to this power, we got to get rid of this gunk. And what it does is it slowly raises all that trauma that you have to the surface slowly. So you start to re-experience things you had in your childhood, like the resentment you had to your parents when you're like, I don't know, 4 or 5, and it raises there. All the the chronic, all the stress that you had in your early life, whatever happened, it just raises that to the surface, so that you can deal with them, so that you can actually let yourself feel that emotion. Sometimes that's all you gotta do. When you have some kind of problem in your life, when you're afraid, when you're angry, sometimes the only thing you can do is to feel. Allow yourself to feel, because that's essentially what your body needs. That's essentially what the little you inside you needs. A kid naturally doesn't suppress an emotion unless it's taught, unless that kid's parents said, stop crying or I'll give you something to cry about. The kid naturally doesn't do that. So that's what a little part of you wants, that little you needs. So it raises there. And when you heal through it, whatever you do, I mean, sometimes it needs more than that. Sometimes you might need a therapist to see your patterns or whatever. Sometimes you might need a 12-step group if you're eligible for it, or if you think you need it. But that's what it is. It raises there so you can deal with them again, so you can get them out, so the more power can flow through you. And the more power that flows through you, one of the things you're going to experience when you do spiritual practice, and one of the things that I experienced is, oh my God, I didn't know life was that great, right? Here's an interesting that I experienced, is that, oh my God, I said, I didn't know colors were this bright. Like one time I was doing a spiritual practice and I woke up and I opened my eyes and I'm like, oh wow, everything is much brighter. I didn't know these trees were that green. The leaves were that green. I didn't know the sky was this blue. I didn't know the clouds were this bright. I didn't know like the colors were so vibrant. The colors just like changed, and I still see them as vibrant ever since. So, when you're in your suffering, you don't realize what life you're missing. You don't realize what's good is. You don't actually know how good it can get. Well, let me tell you, the life can get bigger than your imaginations. You can have as good as life, like bigger than your imaginations. And that's what essentially happens. Because when you're suffering, you can only imagine a specific kind of life that you want to live. There's only a limit. Oh, I wish I had this money, but like when you grow up and when you have a specific life, you end up realizing, wow, the life can get even more beautiful than my imagination. And the possibility even knowing that is enough, at least for me, to keep going, to see, wow, like I want to explore how good it can get, how good of a relationships I can form with people, how, what kind of new people that I can meet, what new things that I can do and learn. And maybe there's no end to this evolution, transformation, and it excites me. That's why I do it. And what my practice does, the Call of Power Qigong, is it does the same thing. It gives you that intuition, but it also raises that to the surface. But it also connects you. So the spiritual practice that the Call of Power is a very powerful qigong practice if you want to check it out. And you know, and if you like to know, it's the link is in the description. It's on my Patreon. And yeah, I also, of course, there's also my website. I'll probably put it here, norlakrunedivination.com or somewhere here, to if you want to get readings, rune readings from me. But yeah, so that's it. Thank you for listening, and thank you. And take care of yourselves.